So there's this place called Station Omega 7, right? It's basically the universe's biggest shopping mall for things that go boom. Every year, the Galactic Council hosts the Intergalactic Arms Expo, and every species with a chip on their shoulder and something to prove shows up waving their latest doomsday device around like it's a participation trophy. This year was no different, except for one tiny detail. Humanity showed up. Now, humans had only been part of the galactic community for about 5 years, which in cosmic terms is like showing up to a family reunion where everyone else has known each other for millennia. We were the new kids, the barely evolved apes who'd figured out faster than light travel by sheer stubbornness and an alarming amount of duct tape. Enter Jake Reeves, engineer extraordinaire from Earth's Colonial Defense Force, currently standing in booth 17B, sandwiched between a Kralaxian particle beam vendor and a Zephyrite gravity mine salesman. Jake was lean, perpetually sleep-deprived, and had the kind of smile that said he knew something you didn't. His booth, decorated with what could only be described as a medieval fair reject sale, featured swords, spears, a longbow, and the centerpiece, a gorgeous recurve crossbow made of carbon fiber composite. The aliens hated it immediately. "Is this a joke?" Commander Thrautix bellowed, his reptilian scales turning a deeper shade of purple, which Jake had learned meant either anger or indigestion. Thrautix was a Vextorian, 7 feet of muscle and military medals, with a face that looked like someone had tried to make a dragon but gave up halfway through. "You bring medieval weapons to a military arms expo?" Jake leaned against his booth, completely unbothered. "Medieval? Nah, Commander. Renaissance era, actually. There's a difference. The crossbow wasn't perfected until the 1400s, which technically makes it early modern period weaponry." Thrautix's eye twitched. "It's wood and string, carbon fiber and synthetic polymer cables. But sure, close enough." That's when Pip showed up. Pip was what humans affectionately called a flying spaghetti monster, though the official designation was Tentaculi minimus. He was about the size of a basketball, with 8 wiggly tentacles, 2 huge, curious eyes, and a translator box that made him sound like he'd been sucking helium. He floated over to Jake's booth, genuinely fascinated. "Human Jake! Human Jake! What is this marvelous device?" Pip's tentacles waved at the crossbow like a kid pointing at candy. "That, my gelatinous friend, is a crossbow. Humans used these to hunt, fight wars, and generally solve problems before we invented gunpowder." "Before gunpowder?" Thrautix laughed, a sound like rocks in a garbage disposal. "You're showcasing weapons from before you even had proper explosives? What's next? Sharpened sticks? Angry thoughts?" A small crowd of alien arms dealers had gathered now, all sharing Thrautix's amusement. There was Krelix, a mantis-like Chitonian, Velmora, a crystalline being who communicated through light pulses, and Glorp, who was basically a sentient pile of aggressive moss with surprisingly good taste in shoes. Jake just smiled wider. "You know what's funny about you advanced species? You all forgot something really important." "And what's that?" "Primitive." Thrautix sneered. That simple usually means reliable. Thrautix's scales rippled with what Jake was now certain was pure annoyance. The commander stepped closer, towering over Jake's booth, his breath smelling like burnt copper and regret. "Reliable? Reliable? I have conquered 47 star systems with Vextorian military technology. Our weapons can crack planets. Our rifles fire ionized antimatter. Our grenades create miniature black holes." He jabbed a clawed finger at Jake's crossbow. "That toy couldn't crack an egg." Pip's tentacles curled nervously. "Commander, perhaps we should respect all cultural approaches. To defensive technology, silence, microbe." Thrautix turned back to the growing crowd. "I'll tell you what, human. Since you're so confident in your wooden relics, let's have a demonstration. Right here, right now. The expo arena is open. We'll both take shots at the standard target drones. Whoever destroys more wins." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Wins what exactly?" "Respect, credibility, and the primary defense contract with the Galactic Council, worth approximately 40 million credits." Thrautix's smile was all teeth. "Unless you're afraid?" The crowd murmured with excitement. Nothing spiced up an arms expo like public humiliation. Jake scratched his chin, pretending to think about it. "Sure, why not? I've got time before lunch." "Excellent. Prepare to be educated on what real weaponry looks like." Thrautix snapped his fingers, and 2 of his attendants rushed over with what looked like a weapon designed by someone having a fever dream. The Stellar Incinerator 9000 was 6 feet long, covered in glowing tubes, rotating parts, and had what appeared to be a small nuclear reactor attached to the grip. 20 minutes later, they'd gathered in the expo arena, a reinforced testing zone with energy shields and target drones hovering at various distances. About 200 spectators filled the viewing gallery, which was roughly 1/3 actual interest, and 2/3 hoping to see the human fail spectacularly. Throdix went first, naturally. He hefted the stellar incinerator onto his shoulder with a grunt, pressed 17 buttons in sequence, waited for the warm-up cycle, adjusted 3 dials, and finally aimed at the closest target drone. "Behold!" he roared and pulled the trigger. The weapon made a sound like a dying whale, flashed bright purple, and fired a blob of superheated plasma that wobbled through the air like a drunk firefly. It hit the target drone, which sparked, smoked, and sort of melted in half before falling to the ground. The crowd politely applauded. "One target destroyed," announced Clerk Buston, the station's safety officer. He was an insectoid xylophile, with compound eyes and a clipboard that might as well have been surgically attached to his thorax. Contestant must now wait for mandatory cool-down period. Estimated time, 4 minutes. Jake couldn't help himself. 4 minutes? What if you needed to shoot twice in, I don't know, a combat situation? The stellar incinerator is a precision instrument, Throdix snapped, watching his weapon literally steam. It requires thermal regulation. 3 other aliens took their turns. Krelix's quantum disruptor short-circuited after 1 shot. Velmora's photon lance worked beautifully but took 90 seconds to charge between shots. Glorp's spore cannon was just gross. Effective, but gross. It dissolved the target in acidic fungus while everyone in the viewing gallery gagged. After all the demonstrations, the scoreboard read, "Various aliens, 1 target each, lots of problems." "Now then, human," Throdix said, his weapon finally cooled down. "Show us what your primitive stick can do. Try not to injure yourself drawing it back." Jake stood up, grabbed his crossbow, and walked calmly to the firing line. Pip floated beside him, whispering, "Human Jake, are you certain about this? These beings will mock us forever if this fails." Jake winked at his tiny friend. "Pip, buddy, have a little faith. Besides, I haven't even shown them the fun part yet." He raised the crossbow, and the entire gallery burst into laughter. The laughter echoed through the arena like someone had told the universe's worst joke. Jake stood there, crossbow in hand, waiting for the crowd to finish. Throdix was practically wheezing, his scales shaking with amusement. Oh, this is perfect," the commander gasped. "Someone record this. I want to show my hatchlings what happens when a species evolves too slowly." Pip's tentacles drooped. "Perhaps we should withdraw, human Jake. There's no shame in Pip. Relax. Watch and learn, little buddy." Jake reached into his equipment case and pulled out what looked like a standard crossbow bolt, except it wasn't standard at all. The shaft gleamed with a metallic finish, and the tip had a subtle blue glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. Clerk Buston's antennae twitched. "Contestant, please identify your ammunition for safety protocol purposes." "Oh, sure. It's a bolt." "Yes, but what type of bolt? A very special bolt." Buston's mandibles clicked nervously. "That's not technically an answer that satisfies Regulation 7-3-. Look, you want the technical specs or you want me to shoot? Because I can stand here and explain physics all day, but I thought we were doing a demonstration." Throdix waved dismissively. "Let him shoot his arrow, clerk. The sooner he fails, the sooner we can move on to species with opposable brains." Jake loaded the bolt into the crossbow with practiced ease, the mechanism clicking satisfyingly. He turned to face the crowd, and his expression shifted from casual to serious. This was the moment he'd been waiting for since Earth had joined the galactic community and realized everyone thought humans were adorable, harmless primitives. "You know what your problem is?" Jake called out to the assembled aliens. "All of you got so obsessed with making weapons more complicated that you forgot the fundamental principle of warfare. You need something that works fast, and works reliably. You all brought weapons that need cooldown periods, charging cycles, calibration sequences." He hefted the crossbow. This is ready to fire the second I pull the trigger." Yes, very inspiring," Throdix drawled. "It's still a wooden children's toy. See, that's where you're wrong, Commander. This isn't just a crossbow, and these aren't just bolts." Jake held up the ammunition so the light caught the metallic surface. Humans learned something important really early in our history. We learned that if something works, you don't replace it. You upgrade it. Pip's eyes widened. Human Jake, what did you do?" "Well, little buddy, I took a medieval design and asked myself a question. What if instead of the crossbow providing all the kinetic energy, It just provided the initial launch velocity. What if the projectile could accelerate ITSELF after it left the rail? The crowd went quiet. A few of the smarter aliens started to look worried. Jake grinned. So I hollowed out these bolts and installed miniaturized railgun cores, magnetic acceleration technology, powered by a microfusion cell. The Crossbow launches the bolt at about 300 feet per second, which is fast enough to trigger the internal accelerator. Then the bolt's magnetic coils engage, and suddenly you've got a projectile moving at 0.02% the speed of light. Throdix's face went from purple to pale yellow. That's not a crossbow anymore. That's still fired from a crossbow, still uses a bolt, still requires me to manually load and aim it. By every definition in your Expo rules, Commander, this is a primitive weapon system. I checked. Jake's smile was absolutely vicious now. Pip helped me read through all 17,000 pages of regulations. Isn't that right, buddy? Pip's tentacles wiggled with excitement. Section 4. Paragraph 92. Subsection Delta. The weapon classification is determined by the delivery system, not the projectile. Human Jake is technically correct, which according to my research is the best kind of correct. You can't seriously, Throdix started. Oh, I seriously can. Jake turned toward the target range, where 5 drones hovered at increasing distances. He raised the crossbow, settled the stock against his shoulder, and took aim at the farthest target, a good 300 yards away. For the record, Jake said calmly, humans also learned something else important. We learned that sometimes the old ways and the new ways work better together than either one works alone. We call it innovation. You might want to look it up. He pulled the trigger. The crossbow made a sound that was almost polite, a gentle thwip that seemed laughably underwhelming compared to the stellar incinerator's dying whale scream or the quantum disruptor's electric shriek. The bolt left the rail, and for about half a second, the entire gallery started laughing again. Then physics got involved. The magnetic coils inside the bolt engaged with a sound like reality being unzipped. The air itself seemed to split open as the bolt went from 300 feet per second to 40,000 feet per second in the space of 10 meters. The sonic boom hit a fraction of a second later, a thunderclap that rattled the arena's reinforced windows and set off half the proximity alarms in the station. The bolt hit the farthest target drone dead center. Hit was actually too gentle a word. The drone didn't explode. It didn't shatter. It ceased to exist in any meaningful sense. One moment it was there. The next it was a rapidly expanding cloud of superheated particles and regret. The bolt punched through it like it wasn't even present and kept going, tagging the second drone, then the third, then the fourth, vaporizing each one with casual indifference. The fifth drone, closest to Jake's position, managed to survive for almost a full second before the bolt's magnetic field destabilized, and it detonated like a miniature star going supernova. The explosion was contained by the arena's shields, barely, but the shockwave still rattled everyone's teeth. Then, in the terrible silence that followed, there was a new sound. A hissing, groaning, metallic complaint. Jake looked up just in time to see the bolt, what was left of it, had punched clean through the arena's rear wall, through the reinforced ablative armor plating, and out into the corridor beyond. Atmosphere was screaming out through a hole roughly the size of a grapefruit. Emergency klaxons started wailing. Red lights flashed. Somewhere, a mechanical voice announced, "Hull breach detected. Hull breach detected. Please remain calm and proceed to your nearest panic station." Clerk Buston dropped his clipboard. The viewing gallery sat in absolute stunned silence, except for Pip, who was doing excited loop-de-loops in the air, his tentacles flailing with joy. Human Jake, you destroyed all the targets, and part of the station. Mostly the targets, though. Jake lowered the crossbow, trying very hard not to look smug and failing completely. So, anyone want to call that one target or 5? Because I'm flexible on the scoring here. Throdix's mouth was hanging open, his forked tongue dangling out like a broken necktie. His scales had gone completely white, which Jake figured was the Vexistorian equivalent of a blue screen of death. "That's... you just..." Throdix stammered, pointing at the hole in the wall where maintenance drones were already swarming with emergency sealant. "You violated at least 40 safety protocols." Did I, though? The arena's shields contained most of it. The wall thing was just unfortunate trajectory. Jake ejected the crossbow's string tension with a casual lever pull, safing the weapon. Besides, you wanted a demonstration of effectiveness. 5 targets, 1 shot. I'd say that's pretty effective. Clerk Buston had retrieved his clipboard and was scribbling furiously, his compound eyes twitching in what might have been an insectoid panic attack. Property damage, atmospheric breach, Unauthorized relativistic weapons discharge, causing mass hysteria. 17 counts of exceeding recommended decibel levels. But I didn't break any rules, right? Jake interrupted, walking over to the safety officer. I mean, my weapon is classified as primitive according to Section 4, Paragraph 92, Subsection Delta. Pip checked. He did check, Pip confirmed, floating over. Human Jake followed all the rules, technically. Technically. Buzzton's antennae were vibrating so fast they were humming. Technically, you turned a medieval siege weapon into a relativistic kinetic kill vehicle and fired it inside a populated station. A lightly populated testing arena with appropriate safety shields, Jake corrected. Which held up great, by the way. You guys do good work on the shielding. Really top-notch. The crowd was starting to recover from their shock, and the murmuring began. Alien weapons dealers were pulling out their communication devices, frantically making calls. Several were staring at Jake like he'd just sprouted a second head. Glorp, the moss creature, was literally smoking with what might have been fear or possibly just spontaneous combustion. It was hard to tell with Glorp. Krelix, the mantis alien, clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. The human raises a valid point. He did destroy all 5 targets with a single discharge. That's technically a perfect score. Technically, Throdix finally found his voice, though it came out about 3 octaves higher than normal. He nearly depressurized the station. Nearly doesn't count, Commander, Jake said, slinging the crossbow over his shoulder. Also, just for the record, this was the low-power bolt. I've got some experimental heavy ammunition back at my booth that I'm pretty sure violates several laws of thermodynamics. Didn't bring those because, you know, first impressions and all. Pip gasped. Oh, buddy, so much bigger. Throdix looked like he might have an aneurysm. Throdix's scales were cycling through colors like a mood ring having an existential crisis. Purple to yellow to a kind of sickly green that suggested his internal organs were reconsidering their life choices. He pointed a trembling claw at Jake, his voice rising to a pitch that probably scared small animals on nearby planets. Cheating! This is blatant, obvious, flagrant cheating. Jake blinked. Cheating how exactly? You modified the ammunition. You put advanced technology inside a primitive weapon. That's not a crossbow anymore. That's a war crime waiting to happen. Actually, Pip chimed in helpfully, floating between them. The Expo rules are very specific about this, Commander. Section 4, Paragraph 92, Subsection Delta. Clause 3 clearly states that weapon classification is determined by the mechanical delivery system and firing mechanism, not by the projectile composition. As long as the crossbow itself remains mechanically primitive, the ammunition can be anything the contestant desires. Throdix whirled on the tiny alien. You helped him with this? I helped him understand the rules. That's called research, Commander. Perhaps you should try it sometime instead of just assuming your overpriced plasma dispensers are the peak of military evolution. Pip's tentacles were waving indignantly, which made him look like an angry car wash. The crowd was getting larger now. Word had spread through the station faster than the laws of relativity should have allowed, and aliens from every corner of the expo were cramming into the viewing gallery. Some were taking holographic recordings. Others were placing what looked suspiciously like bets. Velmora, the crystalline being, pulsed with light that Pip's translator helpfully converted to speech. The small one makes a compelling argument. The human did follow the technical specifications of the competition. Perhaps we should accept that our assumptions about primitive weaponry were incomplete. Incomplete? Throdix was practically frothing now. The human turned a children's toy into a relativistic kill vehicle. That's not incomplete understanding. That's psychological warfare. Is it, though? Jake leaned against the arena railing, enjoying this way too much. I mean, your stellar incinerator needed 4 minutes to cool down between shots. My crossbow? I can reload. In about 5 seconds. Let me show you. He reached into his equipment case and pulled out another bolt, this one with a red glow instead of blue. The crowd collectively took a step back. Clerk Buzzton's clipboard actually burst into flames in his hands, which seemed physically impossible but somehow appropriate. No, absolutely not. I am invoking emergency regulation Omega-7. No further weapons testing until I have reviewed the insurance implications and filed at least 47 forms. Relax, Buzzton. I'm just demonstrating the reload speed. Watch. Jake loaded the bolt with practiced efficiency, the crossbow clicking as the string locked into place. 5 seconds, exactly as promised. He didn't aim or fire, just safed it and held it up. See? Ready to go again. How's your incinerator doing, Commander? Throdix glanced at his weapon. which was still venting steam and making concerning whining noises. The cooling cycle display read 2 minutes and 37 seconds remaining. Krelix clicked thoughtfully. The human's point about reliability is becoming increasingly difficult to refute. In a sustained combat scenario, his weapon would achieve a significantly higher rate of fire than most of our designs. That's because our designs are sophisticated, Throdix roared. They have safety features and proper engineering and 4-minute cooldown periods that would get you killed in any real fight, Jake finished. Look, Commander, I'm not saying plasma weapons are bad. I'm saying you over-engineered them to the point where they're impractical. You got so caught up in making the most powerful weapon that you forgot to make it usable. A new voice cut through the argument. The human is correct. Everyone turned. Standing at the entrance to the viewing gallery was Administrator Quelix, head of the Galactic Council's Defense Procurement Committee. She was a Signaran, tall and elegant with iridescent feathers and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. 2 armed guards flanked her, which was standard protocol, but the fact that she was here, at the expo, was decidedly not standard. Throdix immediately snapped to attention. Administrator, I was just explaining to this human that his weapon violates the spirit of innovation? Quelix glided forward, her feathers catching the light. The spirit of practical military application? Or perhaps the spirit of embarrassing a Vex-Torian commander in front of his peers? Throdix's scales went completely white again. Quelix approached Jake's position, examining the crossbow with genuine interest. I've been watching your demonstration, Mr. Reeves. The Council has been watching, actually. We've had concerns about the current state of galactic military technology for some time now. Too expensive, too complicated, too prone to failure in field conditions. See, the Administrator gets it, Jake said. However, Quelix continued, her tone sharpening, you did just punch a hole in a populated station. That's not ideal. In my defense, the arena was supposed to contain shots up to classified threat level 7. My bolt was maybe a level 5. Your contractor might have cut some corners on the back wall. Clerk Buston made a strangled noise. The back wall was triple reinforced ablative armor plating. Might want to go for quadruple next time. Several aliens in the crowd were now furiously taking notes. Jake noticed more than a few weapons manufacturers looking at their own designs with newfound suspicion, like they'd just realized their children were disappointing. Glorp, the moss creature, burbled something that the translator rendered as, "Does the human take apprentices?" asking for a friend who is definitely me. Throdix wasn't done fighting. Administrator, you cannot seriously be considering giving the primary defense contract to a species that's been spacefaring for less than a decade. They barely understand quantum mechanics. They think duct tape is an acceptable repair solution. It is an acceptable repair solution, Jake protested. We've got space stations held together with the stuff. Works great. That's terrifying, not impressive. Why can't it be both? Quelix raised a hand, silencing them. Commander Throdix, your stellar incinerator costs 400,000 credits per unit, requires a specialized maintenance team, and has a 43% failure rate in combat conditions according to field reports. Mr. Reeves's crossbow costs approximately 8,000 credits to manufacture, can be maintained by anyone with basic technical knowledge, and just successfully destroyed 5 targets with 1 shot. From a purely economic standpoint, the choice is obvious. But, Throdix looked around desperately for support. They're humans. They still have wars on their home planet. They eat meat. They listen to something called death metal for entertainment. Actually, I'm more of a classic rock guy myself, Jake interjected. That's not better. Pip was practically glowing with excitement. Does this mean human Jake wins? Does he get the contract? Can I be his business partner? I've already designed a logo. Quelix's feathers ruffled in what might have been amusement. The contract? No, not yet. Mr. Reeves will need to submit to full safety testing, environmental impact studies, and pass at least 90 different regulatory reviews before the council can make an official decision. Jake's face fell. 90 reviews? That'll take months. Yes. However, Quelix smiled, which on a Signaran looked slightly predatory. The council is prepared to offer you a provisional research and development contract, effective immediately. You'll work with our engineers to refine your designs, ensure they meet safety standards that don't involve puncturing station hulls, and develop a full product line. Payment is 50,000 credits up front, with performance bonuses. Okay. Yeah, I can work with that. Excellent. Report to council chambers tomorrow at 0900 hours. Quelix turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Reeves? Bring more of those bolts. The Council is very interested in seeing what else humans consider primitive weaponry. She swept out, guards in tow, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Throdix stood frozen, his entire worldview clearly shattered. Finally, he managed, "This is the worst day of my military career." "Could be worse, Commander," Jake said cheerfully. "I haven't even told anyone about the trebuchet designs yet." "The what?" "Siege weapon. Throws 90-kilogram projectiles over 300 meters using counterweight mechanics. Now imagine what happens when those projectiles have their own propulsion systems and targeting computers." Throdix made a sound like a deflating balloon and walked away, his attendants scrambling after him with the still-cooling stellar incinerator. Pip did 3 complete aerial loops. "Human Jake, we're going to be rich and famous, and probably responsible for a complete restructuring of galactic military doctrine." "Yeah, buddy. Yeah, we are." Jake grinned, watching the crowd of aliens now mobbing his booth, all wanting to see the crossbow up close. "You know what the best part is?" "What's that?" "I haven't even shown them the compound bow yet." 3 hours later, Jake's booth looked like it had been hit by a localized tornado made of curious aliens and credit transfers. Pip was frantically processing orders while Jake fielded questions from weapons manufacturers, who'd suddenly realized that primitive didn't mean useless, it meant overlooked. The crossbow sat on display under a hastily installed force field, Clerk Buston's idea, implemented with 17 additional safety protocols and a liability waiver that was longer than some species' constitutions. Jake was explaining the finer points of medieval warfare to a fascinated group of Chitonian engineers when Pip floated over, all 8 tentacles clutching data pads. Human Jake, you won't believe the morning we've had!" 17 confirmed orders for demonstration units, 43 research partnerships requests, and 6 marriage proposals, though I think 3 of those might be translation errors. Only 3? The other 3 were definitely intentional. Glorp was very specific about the prenuptial arrangements. Jake laughed, accepting another data pad from a Zephyrite merchant who wanted to discuss bulk manufacturing rights. The galaxy, it turned out, was very interested in what else humanity had been doing for the last 10,000 years while everyone else was developing plasma weapons and gravity manipulation. Throdix hadn't returned, but Jake had received a terse message from him an hour ago. It read simply, "I hate you, respectfully, Commander Throdix," which, coming from a Vextorian military officer, was basically a declaration of grudging admiration. As the crowd finally started to thin station, time was approaching evening cycle, and even arms dealers needed sleep. Jake sat down on his equipment case and pulled out his personal data pad. Pip settled onto his shoulder, exhausted but happy. "We did good today, didn't we, Human Jake?" "We did great, little buddy. You know what this means, right? That humanity is going to revolutionize galactic warfare and possibly cause several species to completely rethink their military strategies?" "Well, yeah, that." But also Jake pulled up a schematic on his data pad, showing a design that made Pip's eyes widen to comical proportions. "It means we've got funding to build the really fun stuff now." The schematic showed a sword. Not just any sword, but a beautifully engineered blade with a molecular vibration generator built into the hilt, edge alignment stabilizers, and what appeared to be a miniaturized plasma field emitter running along the cutting edge. "Human Jake, is that a vibroblade?" "Yeah, oscillates at 50,000 cycles per second, cuts through most standard armor plating like butter. The plasma field is just for the dramatic glow effect, completely unnecessary, but it looks amazing in low light." Pip's tentacles trembled. "Your species weaponized swords. In the space age. Why would you do that?" "Because sometimes you run out of ammo, Pip, and sometimes you need to make a point up close and personal. Plus, and I cannot stress this enough, they look incredibly cool." Jake scrolled to another schematic. "I've also got designs for smart javelins, self-guiding throwing axes, and a longbow with a maximum effective range of 3 kilometers. That's terrifying. That's humanity, buddy. We never forgot where we came from." Every species in the galaxy looked at their primitive weapons and thought, "Thank goodness we evolved past that nonsense." Humans looked at ours and thought, "But what if we made them worse?" "I think you mean better. Pip, in the context of weapons design, worse and better are the same thing." A notification popped up on Jake's datapad. It was from Administrator Quelix. "Mr. Reeves, the Council has reviewed your preliminary schematics. We are particularly interested in your notes regarding siege weaponry and orbital mechanics. Please bring detailed plans for your trebuchet to tomorrow's meeting. Also, please confirm that your species has not, in fact, already weaponized catapults for space combat. The Council needs to know for insurance purposes." Jake grinned and started typing a response. "Administrator, I'm pleased to report that we haven't weaponized catapults for space combat. Yet. However, I do have some interesting thoughts about mass drivers and Newton's third law that I'd love to discuss. See you tomorrow. Jake Reeves, professional primitive. He hit send and leaned back, watching the last few stragglers examine his booth. A group of young Kralaxian military cadets were staring at the crossbow with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. Pip giggled, a sound like bubbles popping. Human Jake, I just realized something. Your species joined the Galactic Council 5 years ago, and in that time, you've barely made any waves. Everyone thought humans were just going to quietly integrate and follow everyone else's lead. And today you showed the entire galaxy that humanity's been sitting on 10,000 years of creative violence that nobody else even considered. You've basically announced that Earth is entering the arms industry with a back catalog that makes everyone else's technology look overcomplicated and expensive. Yeah, that's a pretty good summary. The other species are going to be so worried about what else you've been hiding. Jake's grin turned absolutely wicked. Good. Let them worry. Maybe next year I'll bring the flamethrower. The what? Ancient human weapon. Throws fire. Very simple, very effective, very terrifying. We used them in wars for centuries before we even left the planet. Pip's tentacles went limp. Your species weaponized fire? Fire was a weapon? Pip, buddy. Humanity weaponized literally everything. Rocks, sticks, water pressure, sound waves, light, darkness, biological agents, weather patterns, psychology, and in one notable case during the 21st century, a frozen chicken launched from a compressed air cannon to test aircraft windshields. Why would you test windshields with frozen chickens? To make sure they could survive bird strikes during flight. Except someone forgot to thaw the chicken first, and it went through the windshield like a missile. Very embarrassing. Also very funny. I don't understand your species at all. Nobody does, Pip. That's what makes us special. Jake stood up, stretching. Come on, let's close up the booth. Big day tomorrow, and I need to finish the trebuchet calculations. I'm thinking we mount it on a rotating platform with gyroscopic stabilization, use quantum lock targeting for precision, and load it with self-guided projectiles that can adjust trajectory mid-flight. That's not a trebuchet anymore. That's a planetary bombardment system. It's a trebuchet with ambition, Pip. There's a difference. Jake started packing up his equipment, carefully securing the crossbow in its case. You know what the best part about all this is? What? This is just the beginning. Earth's got thousands of years of warfare history, and we documented everything. Swords, spears, maces, flails, war hammers, battering rams, siege towers, Greek fire, crossbows, longbows, composite bows, boomerangs that actually come back, weighted chains, kusarigama, kunai, shuriken, chakram, and that's just the stuff from before we invented gunpowder. Pip made a whimpering sound. How is your species not extinct? Honestly, we've been asking ourselves that question for millennia. Best guess? We're too stubborn to die and too creative to stop finding new ways to be dangerous. Jake sealed the last equipment case and looked around the expo hall. The galaxy's about to learn something important, Pip. What's that? That when humans said we came in peace, we meant it. But we never said we came unarmed. Pip laughed, a sound of pure joy mixed with existential terror. I can't wait to see what happens next. Stick with me, buddy. We're going to make history. Or possibly violate several weapons treaties. Why not both? They left the expo hall together. Jake carrying his cases of primitive weaponry and Pip floating beside him, already designing marketing materials for their new business venture. Ancient Earth Arsenal, where old school meets new school, and everything in between gets destroyed. Behind them, station maintenance was still working on patching the hole in the arena wall. It would take 3 days, 17 repair drones, and a complete replacement of the rear bulkhead section. The patch crew chief, a grizzled, Vextorian engineer, stared at the damage and shook his head. Humans, he muttered. 5 years in the galactic community and they're already changing everything. His assistant, younger and less experienced, looked confused. Is that bad? The crew chief thought about it for a long moment, watching Jake and Pip disappear around the corner, already planning their next impossible weapon. Ask me again in 5 years, kid. If we're still alive, I'll let you know. Somewhere in the station, in the secure council chambers, Administrator Quelix was reading Jake's preliminary designs for orbital trebuchets and smiling in a way that would have terrified anyone who knew her well. The galaxy was about to get a lot more interesting, and somewhere on Earth, in a small workshop in Colorado, An engineer named Jake's mentor received a message. Hey, Professor Martinez. Remember all those jokes about weaponizing medieval siege equipment? Turns out the galaxy thinks they're actual good ideas. I'm going to need those catapult blueprints you said you were keeping just in case. Also, do we still have that operational ballista from the Renaissance Fair? Asking for a friend. A very rich friend who just signed a contract with the Galactic Council. Talk soon, Jake. Professor Martinez read the message twice, laughed until he cried, and immediately started pulling blueprints from his archive. Humanity had joined the stars. The stars were utterly unprepared.